I still remember the exact sound. Not the crash, not the shouting, not even the sickening silence afterward. It was the faint click of a video file opening on the mechanic's old desktop computer. That tiny, harmless sound was the moment my entire life shattered. Because what I saw on that screen wasn't just why my car had broken down, it was why my marriage had already died, and I just hadn't known it yet. And the worst part? The person who killed it was the one I loved more than anyone in the world. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I loved my wife. Not the casual, comfortable kind of love people talk about after 10 years of routine. No, I mean the kind that makes you feel lucky every single morning you wake up next to someone. The kind that makes you look at them when they're not watching, just to admire how they exist. Her name was Sarah, and she was my entire world. We'd been married for 6 years. No kids yet, by choice. We wanted to travel first, build our careers, and enjoy being just us before bringing someone else into the picture. Our life was simple, peaceful, predictable, and I thought safe. We had routines: Friday night takeout, Sunday grocery runs, random late-night drives where we'd talk about our future. She loved those drives. She said being in the car with me felt like being inside a little bubble where nothing bad could ever touch us. I believed her. God, I believed her. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who thought they had a perfect marriage right before everything fell apart. One comment stuck with me. It said, "The scariest betrayals are never loud. They happen quietly while you're busy loving someone." At the time, I didn't understand how true that was. But looking back now, the signs were always there. They were just small enough for me to ignore. The first thing that changed was her phone. She used to leave it anywhere, on the couch, kitchen counter, bathroom sink. She'd even ask me to reply to messages for her when she was busy. But then, suddenly, her phone was always face down, always locked, always within arm's reach. At first, I laughed it off. Everyone goes through privacy phases. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me. Maybe it was work stress. So I told myself not to overthink it. Because love, when it's strong, makes you trust first and question last. Then came the late nights. She worked in marketing, so overtime wasn't usual. But this was different. She wasn't just working late. She was coming home emotionally distant. Not tired, not stressed, just somewhere else. Like part of her stayed behind wherever she had been. I would ask her about her day, and she'd give short, distracted answers. Then she'd go straight to the shower, leaving me sitting there with this strange feeling that I was slowly becoming a stranger in my own marriage. Still, I stayed quiet, because I trusted her, because I loved her, because I never imagined what was really happening. The day everything unraveled seemed completely normal. It was a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee when she walked into the kitchen already dressed for work, keys in hand. She kissed me quickly on the cheek. "Hey," she said casually, "can I take your car today? Mine's making a weird noise." That wasn't unusual. We swapped cars all the time. "Sure," I told her. "Just drive safe." She smiled. That same warm, familiar smile that had made me fall in love with her years ago. And then she left. I didn't know that would be the last normal moment of my life. Around noon, I got the call. Her voice sounded shaky. "My car broke down. I mean, your car. It just stopped suddenly. I'm at a service center now." I frowned. The car was practically new, no issues, regular maintenance. "What happened?" I asked. "I don't know," she said quickly. "They're checking it." There was something strange in her tone. Not panic, not frustration, fear. but not the kind you feel when a car breaks down, the kind you feel when something much worse is about to be discovered. Later that evening, I went to pick her up from the service center. She looked different. Not relieved, not annoyed, not even upset about the inconvenience. She looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. Her hands were trembling slightly as she handed me the repair slip. She said, "They said you should talk to the mechanic." "Why?" I asked. She swallowed. I don't know. He just said it's important." When I walked into the garage office, the mechanic was sitting behind an old computer. He was staring at the screen with a serious expression. Then he looked at me, and the first thing he said changed everything. He didn't talk about engine damage. He didn't mention mechanical failure. Instead, he leaned forward and said quietly, "Sir, before we fix anything, you need to see what your car camera recorded." At that moment, I still thought it would be something simple. Maybe a minor accident. Maybe someone hit the car. Maybe a road rage incident. I had no idea that the video he was about to play would destroy my marriage in less than 5 minutes. And when the screen flickered to life, the very first thing I saw made my heart stop. The screen showed the inside of my car. At first, nothing looked unusual. The camera angle was fixed from the dashboard, something I had installed years ago for safety. It recorded both the road and the front seats whenever the engine was running. The timestamp in the corner read 11:12 a.m. That was only an hour before she had called me. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was steady, my breathing calm. I still had no idea that within seconds, everything I believed about my life was about to collapse. The first thing I noticed was that the car wasn't moving. It was parked. Not on a roadside, not in a parking lot, but in a quiet area surrounded by tall trees. An empty place, isolated, silent. I frowned. Why would she stop there? Then the audio clicked on, and I heard her voice. Soft, nervous, almost excited. "Are you sure no one will come here?" she whispered. My stomach tightened, because she wasn't alone. A man's voice answered, calm, familiar, comfortable. "Relax," he said. "No one ever comes here during the day." The words hit me like ice water, not just because there was another man in the car, but because of the tone between them. It wasn't formal. It wasn't cautious. It wasn't new. It sounded practiced, like two people who had said these things many times before. My hands slowly clenched into fists as I watched. The camera didn't show his face clearly at first. He was leaning forward, partially out of frame, but I saw enough. His arm resting casually on her seat, his body turned toward her, the comfortable closeness between them, that closeness that only comes from familiarity, from intimacy, from something that doesn't start yesterday. Then she laughed, and that sound hurt more than anything else, because it was the same laugh she used with me, the same warm, soft laugh I thought belonged only to our relationship. But here it was, belonging to someone else. "Your husband really has no idea, does he?" the man said. There was amusement in his voice, almost mockery, and she replied without hesitation, "No, he trusts me completely." I felt something inside my chest tear open, not slowly, not gently, but violently, like a glass shattering from the inside out. Because in that moment, it wasn't just betrayal I heard. It was certainty, confidence. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She wasn't guilty. She wasn't conflicted. She was comfortable. The mechanic glanced at me from the corner of his eye. I could tell he was watching my reaction carefully, but I couldn't look away from the screen. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't even process what I was seeing because the woman on that video didn't feel like the woman I married. The man leaned closer to her. "You said you'd talk to him soon," he said. "I will," she replied quietly. "Just give me a little more time." "Time for what?" She hesitated and then said something that destroyed whatever hope I still had left. "Time to make sure I get everything I deserve." I staggered back slightly from the screen. My mind went blank. Everything I deserve. Those words echoed inside my head like a cruel, endless loop, because suddenly, pieces of the past few months started falling into place. Her new interest in our finances, her sudden questions about property ownership, her insistence on updating insurance documents. At the time, I thought she was just being responsible. Now I realized she was planning. The video continued. The man smiled. "He's smart," he said approvingly. "You shouldn't walk away empty-handed after wasting 6 years." Wasting 6 years. The words stabbed deeper than anything else, because to me, those years were everything. Memories, love, growth, trust. But to her, they were nothing more than time invested in a future payout. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself, but the worst part was still coming, because suddenly she leaned forward and kissed him, not hesitantly, not guiltily, not like someone making a mistake, but like someone who had done it 1,000 times before, comfortable, natural, certain, like it was where she truly belonged. I felt something inside me collapse completely. Not anger, not yet, just a deep, hollow emptiness, like the ground beneath my life had vanished. The mechanic quietly paused the video. The room went silent, and for a long moment, I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't even fully understand what reality I was standing in anymore. Then he cleared his throat gently. "Sir," he said softly, "there's more." Those 3 words felt heavier than everything I had already seen, because I didn't know how anything could possibly get worse than this. But I was about to find out that what I had just witnessed was only the beginning of the truth. I didn't want to see more. Every instinct inside me was screaming to walk away, to leave that office, to pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But something stronger held me there, a desperate need to understand, to know how deep the betrayal really went. Because in that moment, not knowing felt worse than any truth. I nodded slowly. "Play it," I whispered. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. The mechanic pressed the key. The video resumed, and the next few minutes completely destroyed whatever remained of the life I thought I had. After the kiss, they pulled apart. She smiled at him in a way I had never seen before. Not the warm smile she gave me, not the playful one she used with friends. This smile was different. It was sharp, calculating, almost cold. "So what's the next step?" he asked. She leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms calmly. "Nothing yet," she said. "We just have to be patient." "Patient?" he repeated. "Yes," she replied. "Once I get the house legally in both our names and the investment account is finalized, then I'll file." My breath stopped. The house, the investment account, everything we had built together. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to take everything first. The man nodded approvingly. "You really thought this through," he said. She gave a small shrug. I had to, she replied casually. I wasn't going to waste years of my life just to walk away with nothing. Her words felt like knives. Years of my life, years of love, reduced to a financial transaction. Then he asked a question that made my blood run cold. And what about him? She didn't hesitate. He won't suspect anything, she said confidently. He still thinks I love him. I felt my chest tighten painfully, because the worst part wasn't just her betrayal. It was the fact that she knew exactly how much I trusted her, and she used that trust as a weapon. The video showed her checking her phone. Actually, she said suddenly, I should go. He'll wonder why I'm taking so long. The man laughed. Yeah, don't want to make the perfect husband suspicious. Perfect husband. The words dripped with sarcasm, mockery, disrespect. She reached for the ignition, and that's when everything changed. The moment she started the engine, there was a loud, strange, grinding sound. The car jerked violently. She gasped. What was that? She asked nervously. The man frowned. Maybe something with the transmission, he said. She tried pressing the gas, but the engine sputtered and then completely died. They both stared at each other in alarm. What do we do now? She asked. He looked irritated. Call roadside assistance or your husband. Her face instantly tightened. No, she said quickly. I can't tell him I was here. That one sentence hit me harder than everything else, because in that moment, it wasn't just about betrayal, it was about shame. She wasn't afraid of hurting me, she was afraid of being caught. The man sighed. Fine, he said, just tell him the car broke down while you were driving. She nodded. Yeah, that'll work. Then she reached for her phone, and I watched as she dialed my number. I remembered that call. I remembered hearing the slight tremble in her voice, the way she sounded nervous. At the time, I thought she was scared about the car, but now I knew she was scared about something else entirely. The video ended shortly after that. The screen went dark, and the room fell into heavy silence. I didn't cry, not immediately. Instead, I felt something far more terrifying. Nothing. No emotion, no anger, no sadness, just a deep, hollow emptiness, like someone had scooped out my entire soul. The mechanic spoke quietly. Sir, I'm really sorry you had to see that. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I stared at the blank screen, trying to process one single question. How long? How long had this been happening? Weeks? Months? Years? And then another thought hit me, one that made my stomach twist violently. What else didn't I know? What other lies was she hiding? What other secrets existed beneath the surface of my marriage? I finally forced myself to speak. Is this all? I asked weakly. The mechanic hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything, because slowly he shook his head. No, he said quietly. There's another recording from earlier this morning. My heart dropped into my stomach, because if what I had just seen was already unbearable, I couldn't even imagine what could possibly be worse. Then he moved the mouse, opened another file, and said something that made the air leave my lungs completely. You should prepare yourself before watching this one, he warned softly, because this explains why your car actually broke down. And in that moment, I realized with horrific clarity that the betrayal I had witnessed so far was only the surface, because whatever was in that next video was going to reveal something far darker, something deliberate, something planned, something that would change everything forever. My hands felt numb as I stared at the screen. A strange dread settled deep inside my chest. The kind of dread that doesn't come from fear alone, but from a terrible certainty that something far worse is about to be revealed. I swallowed hard. "Play it," I said quietly. Even before the mechanic pressed the key, I felt like my life was already ending. The new video began. The timestamp read 8:03 a.m., 3 hours before the recording I had just watched. That meant this happened earlier that same morning, before she even left the house, before she kissed me goodbye, before she smiled and said she loved me. The footage showed the inside of my garage. The car was parked exactly where I had left it the night before. Everything looked normal, still, quiet, ordinary. For a moment, I wondered if this recording would show something mechanical, some simple explanation, some small mercy from the universe. Then the garage door opened, and she walked in. My heart tightened instantly. She wasn't dressed for work yet. She was wearing a hoodie and gloves. Gloves. That detail sent a chill through my entire body, because no one wears gloves inside their own garage unless they don't want to leave fingerprints. She moved carefully, slowly, looking over her shoulder twice, as if she was afraid someone might see her. I felt my breathing grow shallow. A terrible realization was beginning to form in my mind, but I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. She walked to the front of the car, opened the hood, and leaned inside. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I saw her take something out of her pocket, a small bottle, transparent, filled with a clear liquid. My stomach dropped violently, because in that instant, I knew. Before she even did anything, before the truth was fully revealed, I knew. She unscrewed the cap, looked around one last time, and then she poured the liquid directly into the engine. The mechanic paused the video, but it didn't matter because the damage was already done. Not to the car, to me. My mind went blank. I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't even fully understand how someone I loved so deeply could do something so cold, so calculated, so deliberate. Because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't a mistake. This was sabotage, planned, executed, hidden. I finally forced out the words. Why would she do that? My voice sounded broken, barely audible. The mechanic hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Sir, based on what I saw, I think she wanted the car to fail while she was out." He paused gently, maybe to create an excuse or to avoid suspicion. The truth hit me with crushing force. She didn't just want to meet that man secretly. She wanted a built-in alibi, a believable story, a reason to explain why she was somewhere she shouldn't have been. And that meant something even more terrifying. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was something carefully planned. Suddenly, memories started flooding back. Little moments I had ignored, conversations that now sounded different in my head. Her sudden interest in my schedule, her questions about when I would be home, her insistence on taking my car that morning. None of it had been random. Every single detail had been part of a larger plan. The mechanic played the final seconds of the video. After pouring the liquid, she closed the hood calmly, removed her gloves, placed them in a plastic bag, and walked back toward the house as if nothing had happened. I felt something inside me finally break completely. Not like glass, not like a sharp explosion, but like a quiet collapse, a building slowly falling inward, silently, irreversibly, because in that moment I realized something devastating. The woman I loved didn't just betray me emotionally, she didn't just lie, she didn't just cheat, she actively planned deception, manipulation, financial betrayal, and destruction. She wasn't the person I thought she was. Maybe she never had been. I sat down heavily in the chair. My legs couldn't support me anymore. My entire body felt drained of strength, of hope, of belief. Then the mechanic said something that made my head snap up, something I hadn't expected at all, something that would change everything yet again. He leaned forward, lowered his voice, and said quietly, "Sir, there's one more thing you should know." My heart started pounding again because I thought, what else could possibly be left? What more could she have done? Then he showed me something on the screen, a detail I hadn't noticed before, a small reflection in the corner of the video frame. And when I saw it clearly, my entire body went cold, because standing just outside the garage, watching everything she did, was someone else, and that someone was a person I never, ever expected. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The mechanic zoomed into the corner of the frame. There, barely visible in the reflection of the car's side mirror, was a human figure standing just outside the garage entrance. Still, silent, watching. My eyes strained to focus. My mind struggled to process the shape, because the silhouette wasn't random. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone passing by. I recognized the posture immediately, the way the person stood, the slight tilt of their shoulders, the familiar shape of their hair. My breath caught in my throat because I knew exactly who it was. It was my younger brother. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I felt dizzy, like the floor beneath me had suddenly disappeared, because out of every possible person on earth, he was the last one I could ever imagine being involved. His name was Imran. He wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend growing up. We had shared everything: childhood memories, secrets, dreams. When our parents passed away years ago, it was just the two of us left. We had promised each other we would always have each other's backs, always protect each other, always trust each other. And I had trusted him more than anyone, even more than I trusted my wife at times. My mind screamed for a different explanation. Maybe he had just arrived coincidentally. Maybe he had come to visit. Maybe he didn't know what she was doing. Maybe he tried to stop her. Maybe... The mechanic pressed play again, and every one of those desperate hopes died instantly. After she finished sabotaging the engine and closed the hood, she turned toward the garage entrance, and she smiled. Not surprised, not startled, not guilty, but calm, expecting him, because he had been there all along. He stepped into the frame fully. My brother, the person I trusted with my life, the person who used to call me every week just to check if I was okay, the person I had helped financially more times than I could count. And he spoke, his voice steady, cold. "So, it's done?" She nodded casually. "Yes," she replied. He won't suspect anything. My heart felt like it was being crushed inside my chest, not just broken, crushed. Because betrayal from a spouse is one kind of pain, but betrayal from your own blood, that is something entirely different, something far deeper. My brother walked closer to her. He glanced toward the house. "Are you sure he's still inside?" he asked quietly. She gave a small laugh. "He's making coffee. He has no idea." I felt physically sick because I remembered that exact moment, standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee, thinking about how lucky I was to have such a loving family, while just a few meters away, two of the people I loved most were planning to destroy my life. Then my brother said something that shattered the last piece of my heart. "Good," he said, "because once everything is transferred, we can finally stop pretending." Pretending. The word echoed like thunder inside my skull. Because suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. All those times he visited unexpectedly, all those times he stayed longer than necessary, all those private conversations he had while I wasn't paying attention, all those strange glances I had ignored. They hadn't just been hiding an affair. They had been hiding a partnership, a shared plan, a conspiracy. She reached out and touched his arm gently. "Just a little longer," she said softly. "Once the house paperwork is finalized, everything will be ours." Ours. Not hers, not his. Ours. I felt like I couldn't breathe anymore. My entire life, my marriage, my family, my future, everything I had built with trust and love had been nothing more than a target for their greed. Then he leaned closer to her, lowered his voice, and said something that made my blood run ice cold. "You know, he'll never recover from this." She didn't argue, didn't hesitate, didn't show a single trace of regret. She simply replied quietly, "I know." And then she smiled. The video ended. The screen went black, and the silence in the room became suffocating. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even fully feel my own body. Because in that moment, I wasn't just grieving a marriage. I wasn't just mourning a relationship. I was mourning an entire reality, an entire life that had never truly existed. The mechanic didn't say anything. He simply sat quietly, giving me space to process a pain that words could never fully describe. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. I couldn't tell. Time felt meaningless. Finally, a single thought rose slowly in my mind. Not sadness, not confusion, not despair. Clarity. Because for the first time since walking into that office, I understood something with absolute certainty. They thought I was weak. They thought I was blind. They thought I would never find out. And they thought I would never fight back. But they were wrong, because as I sat there, staring at the dark screen, a quiet, cold determination began to form inside me, and I realized something that changed everything. They had planned this for months, but now I had the one thing they never expected me to have: proof. And with that proof, I could do something they never saw coming, something that would turn their entire plan against them, something that would make them regret ever underestimating me. Because in that moment, I stopped being the trusting husband, the loving brother, the naive victim. and I became something entirely different. Someone they would soon learn was far more dangerous than they ever imagined. I didn't react immediately. That was the first thing that changed inside me. Before, I would have confronted them instantly. I would have demanded answers. I would have shouted, cried, begged to understand why. Because that's what someone does when they're still holding on to love, when they still believe there's something left to save. But as I sat there, staring at the black screen, I realized something with chilling clarity. There was nothing left to save, only something left to protect. Myself, my future, and the life they had tried to steal from me. For the first time since watching those videos, my hands stopped shaking, my breathing steadied, and the overwhelming pain inside my chest began to harden into something else, something cold, something focused, something dangerous. I turned to the mechanic. "Can you copy all of this for me?" I asked quietly. He nodded immediately. "I already did," he said. "I had a feeling you might need it." I looked at him, surprised. There was kindness in his eyes and something else, understanding, because he knew exactly what he had just witnessed and he knew what it meant. He handed me a small flash drive. "Everything is here," he said gently. "All recordings, timestamps, nothing edited." I took it slowly. That tiny piece of plastic felt heavier than anything I had ever held because inside it was the truth of my entire life. I thanked him quietly, then walked out of the garage into the evening air. The sky was turning orange with sunset. People were passing by, cars moving, life continuing normally, and that felt surreal because for me, everything had just ended and everything was just beginning at the same time. When I reached home, she was already there, sitting on the couch, looking anxious. The moment she saw me, she stood up quickly. "How did it go?" she asked nervously. "Did they say what's wrong with the car?" I looked at her face, really looked at her, for the first time without love blinding my vision, and what I saw shocked me. Not because she looked evil, not because she looked guilty, but because she looked ordinary, calm, almost bored, like someone waiting for dinner to finish cooking. That was the most terrifying part, how normal she seemed, how easily she could switch between lies and reality, how perfectly she could perform being my wife. I forced myself to act naturally. "Just engine damage," I said calmly. "They're fixing it." She visibly relaxed. "Oh, okay," she said softly. Then she smiled at me, that same familiar smile, the one that once made me feel safe, but now it felt like looking at a stranger wearing her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, touching my arm. "You look tired." I almost laughed at the irony, because in that moment she had no idea how tired I truly was. Tired of lies, tired of trust, tired of loving someone who never truly loved me back. "I'm fine," I said quietly, and that was the first honest lie I had ever told her. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing, feeling the unbearable weight of everything I now knew. At one point, she turned toward me in her sleep, her hand resting lightly on my chest, just like she had done countless nights before. And that simple, familiar gesture nearly broke me. Because for a brief second, my heart desperately wanted to forget everything, to believe this was all a nightmare, to pretend she was still the woman I thought she was. But then I remembered the video, her voice, her words, her smile when she said I would never recover, and the warmth inside me disappeared instantly, replaced by something cold and unshakable. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them emotionally. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, I was going to do something far more devastating. I was going to let them believe their plan was working right until the moment it collapsed completely. The next few days, I acted perfectly normal. I laughed, I ate dinner with her, I asked about her day, I even told her I loved her. And every time I said those words, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes because she thought she was winning. She thought she was still in control. She thought I was still blind. But behind the scenes, I was preparing, quietly, carefully, one step at a time. I met a lawyer, a very experienced one, and when I showed him the recordings, his reaction said everything. He leaned back in his chair slowly, exhaled deeply, and said just one sentence: "They have no idea how much trouble they're in." That was the first moment I felt something close to relief, because for the first time, I wasn't powerless anymore. We began planning immediately, not just a divorce, but a complete legal strategy, one that would protect everything they tried to take and expose everything they tried to hide. But there was one thing left, one final step that had to happen before everything could unfold, and that step would require me to face them both at the same time. Because very soon they were going to sit in a room with me, believing they were about to win everything, without realizing it was actually the moment their entire world would collapse. The day came faster than I expected. It was strange how calm I felt that morning. Not happy, not relieved, but steady, like the quiet stillness before a violent storm finally breaks. I had barely slept the night before, not because I was anxious, but because my mind kept replaying everything. The videos, their voices, their laughter, their confidence that I would never find out. But today, everything was about to change. The plan was simple. My lawyer had arranged a financial discussion meeting, a completely normal conversation on the surface, one they couldn't refuse, because it involved finalizing property documents, which, of course, was exactly what they had been waiting for. When I told her about the meeting, she didn't even try to hide her excitement. "That's good," she said casually. "We should get everything sorted." Her tone was calm, but I saw the subtle spackle in her eyes, the quiet anticipation, like someone standing at the finish line of a race they believed they had already won. She had no idea. She was walking straight into the moment that would destroy everything she had planned. The meeting was scheduled at my lawyer's office that afternoon. Neutral territory, quiet, professional, controlled. Exactly the kind of setting where truth becomes unavoidable. When we arrived, my brother was already there, sitting comfortably in the waiting area, scrolling through his phone. For a split second, our eyes met, and he smiled at me. That same familiar smile he had used my entire life. The one that used to mean loyalty, brotherhood, trust. Now, it felt like looking at a stranger wearing his face. "Hey," he said casually, "you made it." I nodded calmly. Of course. Inside, my heart felt like solid stone. No anger left, no sadness left, just a quiet certainty that this was the final moment. We all sat in the conference room together, my wife on one side, my brother beside her, my lawyer across from us, and me, sitting at the head of the table. For a few minutes, the conversation was completely normal. Documents, financial terms, legal formalities, everything sounded exactly like they expected, and I watched them carefully. I watched the way they exchanged subtle glances, the way they relaxed more and more as the meeting progressed, the way they believed they were in control. Then came the moment, the exact moment everything shifted. My lawyer closed the folder slowly, folded his hands on the table, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Before we proceed with any transfers," he said, "there's something we need to clarify." I saw my wife's posture stiffen slightly. My brother frowned. "Clarify what?" he asked. My lawyer turned toward me, gave a small nod, and that was my signal. I reached into my bag calmly, took out the flash drive, and placed it gently on the table. The room went completely silent. "This," I said quietly, "is why nothing is being transferred." My wife stared at the flash drive, confusion flickering across her face. "What is that?" she asked slowly. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked directly at my brother, held his gaze steadily, and said just 3 words. "Go ahead. Watch." My lawyer connected the drive to his laptop, turned the screen so everyone could see, and pressed play. The first video began, the one showing her in the car, with him, their voices filling the silent room.
every word clear, every lie exposed, every betrayal undeniable. At first, neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. Then I saw it, the exact moment their confidence shattered. Her face drained of color completely, her eyes widened with pure shock, her breathing became shallow. My brother's reaction was even more dramatic. He sat frozen, like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him had disappeared. But the worst part was the silence, the crushing, suffocating silence, as the video continued to play, as their own voices condemned them, as their own words destroyed their entire plan. Then the second video began, the garage recording, the sabotage, the gloves, the liquid poured into the engine, his presence, his voice, their conspiracy. And that was when everything finally broke. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling violently. This isn't." She couldn't even finish the sentence because there was nothing left to deny, nothing left to explain, nothing left to hide. My brother stood up abruptly. "This is illegal," he snapped. "You can't record." My lawyer cut him off calmly. "Dash cameras and security cameras are completely legal," he said, "especially when they record inside private property and owned vehicles." My brother sat down slowly again, and for the first time in his life, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, the kind that comes when someone realizes they have completely lost control. I finally spoke, calm, steady, unshaken. "You both thought I would never know," I said quietly. "You thought you could lie, cheat, plan, and walk away with everything." I paused, looked directly at them, and said the words that ended everything. "But now, you leave with nothing." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced, because in that moment, their entire world collapsed, exactly the way they had planned to collapse mine. And for the first time since discovering the truth, I finally felt something return to me. Not joy, not satisfaction, but something far more powerful. Freedom.
The room was silent, except for the low hum of the laptop. My wife sat frozen, staring at the screen. My brother's face was pale, and I finally felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, the storm inside me had settled. The lawyer closed the laptop gently. "And that," he said, "is everything. All evidence compiled. Everything you've attempted to hide is now legally documented." My wife's hands trembled as she reached for the documents. We can fix this," she whispered. "Fix this?" I echoed, my voice quiet but cold. "No, you had your chance to be honest. You had your chance to do the right thing. And you chose deception, betrayal, greed. There is no fixing this." My brother opened his mouth to argue, but no words came, because he knew, just like she knew, the truth cannot be argued against. We spent the next few hours going through every detail. The lawyer carefully explained the legal protections I had, how all their plans could be blocked, how nothing they had tried to steal would ever reach them. And every word he spoke reminded me that I had regained control. It was surreal watching the people I had trusted most crumble in front of me, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but simply truth. When the meetings ended, I left the office without a single glance back. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because seeing them face the reality of their choices was more powerful than any confrontation I could ever have imagined. Walking back to my car, I realized how heavy life had felt these past months, how exhausting it had been to love blindly, to trust without question, to hope for honesty where there was none. And yet, even with all that pain, there was something extraordinary about this moment, because I had survived. I had endured. I had uncovered the truth. And in surviving, I realized there is a lesson very deep in betrayal, not about punishment, not about revenge, not about control. It's about clarity, about understanding who you can trust, about learning the limits of love, about protecting yourself while still holding space for hope. I drove home slowly, my car feeling heavier than usual. Every mile reminded me of the deception she had planned in my own vehicle, but it also reminded me of something else, my resilience. At home, I sat in silence. The house felt emptier than ever, and yet, it was mine. The truth of my life was now mine, not manipulated, not stolen, not corrupted. For the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding, not just my finances or my home, but my mind, my heart, my sense of self. I deleted all traces of social media interactions with them. I cut contact. I surrounded myself with people who had always been genuine, friends who were real, family who was loyal, people whose love wasn't transactional. And slowly, the pain began to fade. Not entirely, not quickly, but gradually.
I learned to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts, to never ignore subtle signs, to act decisively when my intuition screamed. Most importantly, I learned that love, when blind, can be dangerous, but love, when guided by wisdom and awareness, can be a source of incredible strength. Months later, I finally spoke publicly about the ordeal, not by naming names, not to shame or humiliate, but to share the lesson I had learned, to remind others that betrayal can come from the people closest to you, and that even in the darkest moments, you have the power to reclaim your life. I still remember reading comments on my YouTube videos the day I finally shared the story. I thought I was the only one. I can't believe someone could do this. Thank you for sharing, it gave me courage. And in those moments I realized I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a teacher, a warning. The betrayal didn't define me. It didn't destroy me. It reshaped me, made me stronger, wiser, more aware of the value of truth and loyalty. And even now, when I drive my car alone, I can't help but glance at the dashboard camera, a small reminder of everything I survived, of the truth I uncovered, of the strength I didn't know I had until it was tested. Life continues. People make mistakes. People betray. People disappoint. But the power lies in how you respond, how you reclaim control, how you choose integrity over bitterness. I am still learning, still healing, still building a life that is mine. But one thing is certain. I will never be blind again. I will never take trust for granted. And I will never allow betrayal to define my story. Because even in the darkest moments, even when the people you love most turn against you, you can rise. You can survive. You can reclaim everything that truly matters. And that is the final lesson of my story.